Welcome, everyone, to the Unfiltered Podcast. Lee Stephenson here, church planter and overseer of church planting for Converge.
I'm Danny Parmelee, and I oversee church planting for Converge Mid-America.
And today we're going to have a fun conversation that I think is very relevant to our church planters and lead pastors, and I would say even probably our worship pastors. And we're going to talk about that relationship that exists between a lead pastor and a worship pastor. And what should it look like? What can it look like? How to maximize and make sure you're on the same page as well. So, Danny, when did you, as a church plant, when did you actually officially have a worship pastor? Was that right away? Did you kind of work towards that? That would give us some context of kind of how we're talking about this.
1 year before I left is when we officially had a worship pastor. So, but let me back up and say it this way, is that my good friend from college ended up moving to be part of the church plant, to be the worship leader. So as I'm sharing, even in this time, I have limited experience in the sense that I just had one guy that was with me, and his name's Michael Morgan. He's now the executive pastor at Epicos Church in Milwaukee. And I am so indebted and thankful for the amount of service, because he didn't have any paycheck. He was working a full-time job at Hal Leonard doing, music publishing, and with his spare time, helping us to kind of bootstrap and put together the church plant. So we didn't even give him a stipend. Okay. So this is like grats type of thing. And
yeah.
But I do think that informs it. And there's some really, really great things about that. And we worked well together in the sense that we had a friendship, but we also went head to head. I mean, sparks would fly on, how service planning should go, what we should do, and those types of things. But because we had this respect and love for one another, and that's really what allowed us to be able to work together for so many years. Not to say that we didn't have challenges at times, because like I said, we did, and sparks would fly. But it was maybe 3 years in that we said, okay, we'll give you $300 a month. And then eventually we got to this place where it's like, we need more of your time. And so we made, for us, for a church that didn't have a ton of financial resources, made the leap to hire him on staff so that he could quit his job and devote full time to what he was doing.
So how did the rhythm work when you didn't necessarily have somebody there?
Yes.
24/7, with you in the office and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How did that rhythm look when it came to how you planned out weekends and how you thought through special moments?
Yeah. And not only that we didn't have him there at the office, we didn't have an office, period. So we were, renting a facility, and I was just kind of working out of my home. And so everything was done, coffee shops, a type of thing. But the rhythm for us, I mean, it's hard. Some of this is even hard to remember how we pulled this off, but really would have been through email, where it's like, hey, I'm finishing up my sermon. Here's what it's on. Is there at least somewhat of
Saturday night at 10 o'clock?
Yes,
this is
yes.
actually what I'm going to be preaching on tomorrow.
I mean, seriously, in the beginning, that's really what it was. And it was like, hey, I've got Jesus in my message. You're singing about Jesus. It looks like we've got some good congruency here. But we didn't have this full, like, hey, let's get together and get the creative team together and think about all of these different elements. Now, I will say that it did end up speaking to the ethos and culture of our church, where it was simple. We had simple services. It was preaching and worship and announcements, and that was it. And because that's all we knew and that's all we had time for, type of thing. Now, as the church grew, and especially as we, went multi-site and stuff, now you're talking about full-on meetings that were evaluation. I know we'll have a special podcast that's about evaluation, and then looking forward to the next meeting, and then like a full calendar that was kind of, that was connected to the preaching calendar, but are there some artistic elements that we want to do for the worship service that are beyond just the preaching and, sing 3 songs and sit down type of thing. So
how much freedom did you give the worship leader when it came to actually service development? Was that, was it like, just pick the songs and I'm giving you 3 songs or 4 songs this weekend? Or was there more buy-in to thinking through all the elements and the flow and transitions?
Yeah, again, ours was so probably bland. If you were to look at it, there wasn't a lot to do. And I would like to think that I gave a lot of freedom to Michael to be able to do those different things. Um, and I think it would be later on that there was even thoughts to do other things like, hey, let's, insert whatever video or testimony, or let's do something musically different. Now, yes, it was totally different for Easter Sunday and for even our Good Friday services, where I would just literally say, okay, Michael, do something, and he would do just, I mean, we're talking extraordinary things, like write full orchestra pieces, and like we would just blow it out of the water for those
Goodness.
type of things. But we could not do that for every single week, type of thing. And I would say that for the most part, just generally answering the question, I kind of let him run with it and just had a certain amount of trust. But of course, I'd always be like, hey, it seems like we're just doing this same song over and over and over again. Or I would always say, which this would just irritate him so much. And I hope he's going to listen to this because that'll be kind of funny. Maybe you should have him back on and have him correct it. But I would say we always need one K-Love song. So K-Love, I don't like K-Love. It's not, it's like
Well, you
banned
just
from my
ruined our
radio. I'm
sponsor, man.
sorry, we just ruined. But the reason that I would say that is, what I recognized is that worship teams and worship leaders, they want to be on the front end of things. They're sometimes getting sick of doing the same songs. So they always want to do something new and unique, and they don't want it to seem the same. However, they just need to remember that they need at least some songs where someone goes, I know that song and I can sing along. And I say that for non-believers as well too, because there would be non-believers that they've heard the song because they've been flipping through the stations, or they just maybe started going to church or just dipping their toe in, that they can get involved in it. So that would be my one thing that I'd constantly like, hey, where's our Caleb song? Even though I don't like Caleb, but it just meant the one song that everyone could just kind of sing along with, type of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Makes sense.
what about you? Share a little bit of some of the rhythm, creative planning, how much leeway you think is appropriate to give or not give.
Yeah, we were similar early on in the first church plant where we had volunteers that just were very talented and gifted, and I knew them well, that kind of filled the gap. And we try to meet maybe once a month and just kind of plan out kind of in advance, hey, this is where we're going, and this is, hey, have you thought about this? Could we do a special thing? But the reality is, like, when we were in the movie theater, I mean, it was a 50-minute service. So there was no time for anything extra, no fluff or hey, we're going to do a 8-minute song like that. You just couldn't do it. So that did probably help us in some of that the demand wasn't there to be crazy innovative because we just didn't have the time to be innovative. Once we got to a place where we had a hired worship pastor, I just think it's important for the lead pastor to have a good working relationship with him, because most of the time you're two main people on the stage that people see the most, hear the most, and if you're not in unity and working together, it will show. It'll be obvious. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to just relationally stay well connected to the worship pastor. And so when I was, full-time church planter and pastor, our rhythm was every Tuesday afternoon, we'd actually sit down and we'd just kind of work through a little bit. Okay, where are we at? Everything's set for this Sunday, but we'd work probably about 2 weeks in advance, and we'd just take about an hour and a half. How you doing? We'd pray together. We talk about what God's doing in our personal lives, just to make sure that, we were on the same page, both relationally, but also from a standpoint of what we were putting together on the Sunday. Now it's a little bit more email. I'd say, like Joel, he's not the stage presence worship pastor. He works behind the scenes, but he and I connect usually at least once a month in person, where we'll go grab lunch, just chat and kind of think through. But then it's just constant phone calls, emails, quick meetings here or there, kind of, hey, what about this Sunday? What are we thinking? And it so far that's working pretty well. But we're launching another congregation, and they have their worship pastor and stuff of that sort. And so now the demands are going to be a little bit different. And honestly, I'm putting more of that on Joel to think through service structure and so he actually puts together the entire hour experience, thinking through what song leads to what song, how the transitions are going to look, how are we going to tie in the scripture. I give him the main passages of kind of, hey, this is where I'm going, this is where I'm going to land the plane. And if I'm sitting there going, hey, I think this song would work really well to close out the morning or something of that sort, I'll voice that, and then he'll pop that in, and then we'll talk through communion. How are we going to do communion? And we vary it up. So sometimes we put it at the front half before the sermon. Other times I lead into it from the sermon. And so we do communion once a month. And so he just will follow up like the week before and kind of go, hey, how do you think you're going to wrap up? Do you want to lead into communion from the sermon, or do you want us to put it in the front half?
Yeah.
And that's helpful.
Yeah. I think a point that you made there that's really good is just even speaking through some of the transitions and the feel, which can't always be captured by the sermon title. So you may be doing something. It's like, how's that ending? Like if all of a sudden they're coming up behind you and they're just, blowing out this amazing song, but it was just this super introspective sermon conviction. It's like, yeah, you probably need something that, matches that, a little bit. The other thing is that you said, and it just reminded me, yes, the more services you add, or sites that you add, the complexity gets much more because of the timing of things. So that's where it's like, okay, well, you need to be done by this time because, whether there's going to be, video feed or whatever, those types of things. There's just so much that goes into minute by minute. And yes, there's still room for the Holy Spirit, and it's not all produced, but you have to think through all of those little things, so that you create the best worship experience for those that are participating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it comes down to a part of it when it comes to your Sunday experience. Like, people don't invite people to average. They never do. And so you do need to do a level of work and think through and plan, what are we trying to accomplish this weekend, and making sure the components fit together. And so, like, if you go to a restaurant and you just have an average experience, you're not going to come home and tell the rest of your family, hey, we need to go to this place. You're not going to recommend that for me to go to when next time I come to Nashville. Yeah. And I think there's an element, same thing, it's true with church. And I'm not saying you have to have haze machines and crazy lights and all this other stuff, but there needs to be a plan that's put in place and executed when it comes to what we're trying to accomplish. Where are we trying to lead people in that morning experience? And I think there's only one way to get there, and that's you as a lead pastor and whoever's overseeing worship. Like, you need to spend time fine-tuning and thinking through each element in order to maximize that hour experience that you have.
Yeah. Your original question was, when did we have an official worship pastor? And I answered it by saying not till the year before I left, which is true because Michael never wanted that title. He just wanted to be worship leader because he didn't feel qualified, which speaks to, though, a little bit that as you're considering who you might hire for that, it is more than a music performer. And I've seen a lot of church planners, they look for, I'm just going to look at people's resume based on their YouTube. Can they shred on guitar? What are their vocals like? And to understand that there is that other pastoral part, whether they have the title or not, because Michael clearly was operating that for years and people looked up to him as a pastor, not just someone who was singing songs from the front. That is so important. So not only just your working relationship, but how are they pastoring even their worship teams and developing other leaders on the worship team.
Yeah. Do they have a heart of a worshiper themselves? And I think there's only one way to really figure that out, and you got to spend time with them.
Yep. It's great.
So thanks for tuning in, everyone. And a fun conversation, just talking about that worship and lead pastor relationship. Maximize it as you move forward and spend time together, and make sure you like each other as you kind of move forward. So this has been the Unfiltered Podcast. Till next time, keep it real.